There's a massive signboard on the freeway off-ramp that takes me to work. My photograph is plastered across it. Below it reads, "Our biggest regret, the Michael and Laura family." It stands 40 feet high, seen by countless drivers every single day. My mother and father spent good money to shame me in public. 3 weeks back I drove past it and actually grinned. A real grin, because I'd been expecting them to push things this extreme eventually. My parents, Michael and Laura, raised 2 boys. I'm 31 now, and my younger brother, Ethan, is 28. The favoritism was obvious from the start. Ethan was their golden child, the healthy boy who arrived after 3 heartbreaking losses. I was the trial version, the first attempt they didn't quite get right. My father liked to announce this at family meals, in front of cousins, even during his speech at my college graduation while the audience chuckled. When Ethan barely scraped into a local university despite weak marks, they hosted a huge celebration. When I earned a complete scholarship to a much stronger institution, my father questioned whether I had the brains to manage it, pointing out I'd always been the slower one. I finished with highest honors. They chose Ethan's high school championship game over my commencement. This isn't some tearful tale about craving their affection. I gave up chasing their pride a long time ago. My real goal was constructing a life so secure that their next assault wouldn't be able to touch me. I spent my 20s working relentlessly. Took positions they considered low class, put money aside while they bankrolled Ethan's string of unsuccessful ventures, made smart investments, formed bonds with people who valued me. 4 years earlier, I married Emily. Her parents, James and Sarah, welcomed me like their own child right away. They're present, they genuinely care. They never forget my birthday. My own parents despised Emily, not due to any flaw in her character. She's intelligent, warm-hearted, accomplished. They resented her because her relatives aren't rich, and because she urged me to stop showing up at gatherings where I was always the target of mockery. The first holiday I chose to skip was Thanksgiving 3 years earlier. Mom rang 17 times. Dad recorded a message claiming I was throwing away everything they'd ever provided by picking that female over real family. That female, that's what he called my wife. I ignored it. Continued strengthening my life, received 2 promotions, purchased our own home, began celebrating holidays surrounded by people who actually wanted my company. I thought perhaps they'd finally release their grip. I was mistaken. The giant sign appeared on a Thursday. 3 colleagues messaged me before I even arrived at the office, wondering whether it was some prank. I parked and stared at it for 20 full minutes. This wasn't their lowest point. This was them openly starting a battle. That same week I began uncovering the full extent. A coworker named Daniel informed me that my father had reached out through a shared acquaintance, offering money in exchange for humiliating anecdotes about me. Errors, grievances, gossip. Daniel refused and cursed him out, but felt I should be aware. He passed along 2 additional contacts. I contacted them individually. A lady from finance confessed she'd been offered $500, but ignored it because the request was bizarre. Another colleague avoided my gaze, said he preferred to stay out of it, but confirmed whether he had accepted payment or not. My father was literally trying to buy negative information about me from my own workplace, treating me like someone under police scrutiny. Then on Saturday morning, Emily's mother, Sarah, phoned me, clearly distressed. She and James had received a handwritten letter at their residence from my parents, begging them to persuade Emily to divorce me. The letter alleged I suffered from concealed psychological problems, a history of broken partnerships, that I was a burden, and that the compassionate choice would be pushing for an annulment before any kids came along. My in-laws have known me 6 full years, watched me assist James in repairing his patio, witnessed the steady life we've created, yet my parents sent outright fabrications to sabotage it. Emily was livid. She wanted to confront them right then. I asked her to hold off. I needed to see the complete strategy. With my family, there's invariably another layer. 2 days afterward, a friend from university messaged me a link. "Man, what is going on here?" A full website. A complete site dedicated to listing every supposed failure of my existence. Presented in chronological order starting from boyhood. Age 12. Didn't qualify for elite travel baseball. Age 16. The single AP history pupil who didn't score an A pictures included. Specific dates. The domain's registration details were openly visible, registered under Ethan's name. At the bottom it stated, domain secured for 10 years, a full decade. Ethan had built an entire site designed to ridicule my shortcomings and paid to keep it active for 10 years. He intended to update it regularly, a decade of planned public shame. Emily discovered me frozen in front of the monitor an hour later. She asked what my next step would be. Here's something most people don't grasp. I've been getting ready for this moment for years. Not exactly this sign and this website, but for the day my relatives would cross every boundary of reason. I've preserved evidence. Kept deliberate distance so they could never accuse me of relying on them. Created a foundation far beyond their influence. They still picture me as the frightened child who sobbed after holiday dinners. They believe I'll collapse under public disgrace, crawl back pleading for mercy. They have zero clue how much I've changed. The non-stop ringing began 4 days earlier. Mom, Dad, Ethan, rotating like guards on duty. I haven't picked up once. The signboard remains standing. The site is still online. They're broadcasting to the world that I'm their biggest regret, but meanwhile I've been extremely active. More news when events begin unfolding. Believe me, it's about to start. Update 1. To begin, the responses to my first post were intense. Many readers wondered why I don't simply cut contact and disappear. Here's my reply. I already did that. 3 years prior, quit attending gatherings, stopped dialing, quit making effort. Their response, a giant photograph of me on a highway sign. Disappearing quietly doesn't stop them when they chase after you. So here's what unfolded this week. I finally took one of the calls. It was Mom. She launched straight into her classic tactic, pretending to be puzzled about my anger, claiming they were merely concerned and wanted to guide me toward reality concerning my decisions. I allowed her to continue uninterrupted for roughly 2 minutes. She rambled about how Emily had separated me from my true relatives, how I used to be such a wonderful son until I met her, how the sign was intended as a harsh reminder because their love was so deep. A harsh reminder. She described shaming me publicly before my entire office as a harsh reminder. I posed one single question. I asked whether she considered their actions appropriate conduct for parents who insist they love their child. She paused briefly, then replied that sometimes love requires toughness. Sometimes you must make a person uneasy to help them face reality. I said I completely understood. Then I said I hoped she would remember those exact words in the weeks ahead. She asked what I meant. I ended the call. Here, that's what I've quietly been handling while they've been dialing non-stop. Remember when I mentioned I knew details about how my parents were managing Ethan's commercial loan repayments? Let me clarify. 2 years earlier, my parents guaranteed a large loan for Ethan's startup. The venture collapsed in under 8 months. The debt was significant. My parents have been covering the installments ever since. Their strategy has been paying only the bare minimum while informing the bank they're facing difficulties, repeatedly asking for payment pauses, essentially delaying while Ethan supposedly recovers. They've also been listing Ethan as their dependent for income tax purposes, despite him being 28, living independently, and earning sporadic cash from side gigs. Individually, none of these steps is necessarily unlawful, but together they form a very awkward trail once someone examines it carefully. I never filed any official complaint. What I did was ensure key facts reached the appropriate people through entirely legitimate methods. The bank is now demanding fresh financial records. Their tax filings are under renewed scrutiny. These processes move slowly, but they generate genuine stress, the sort that keeps people awake worrying about what comes next. That's merely the backdrop, though. The major developments began when I visited my in-laws James and Sarah on Sunday. I carried the letter my parents had mailed them. I brought printouts of Ethan's website. I showed proof of my father attempting to bribe coworkers for negative stories. I spread everything across their kitchen table and explained that I needed assistance with a particular matter. James and Sarah are kind-hearted individuals. They also possess valuable connections in our area that my parents are completely unaware of. James has served on the local municipal council for 12 years. Sarah leads the biggest nonprofit group in the region. They know influential people. More crucially, those people trust and respect them. I asked James whether he was acquainted with the owners of the signboard firm that erected the display. He placed 2 calls right then while I waited. It turned out their contracts include an ethics provision. They reserve the right to reject or eliminate material that violates community values or amounts to targeted harassment. Although my father paid cash, the message clearly singles out one person in a potentially libelous manner. James promised to reach out further. By Wednesday, he texted me that the sign company had issued my parents an official warning. They had 72 hours to alter or eliminate the display. Otherwise, the firm would remove it themselves and seek reimbursement for legal expenses. That's when the ringing intensified dramatically. 20 calls Wednesday, over 30 on Thursday. Dad recorded a message that was mostly shouting about how I was deliberately ruining the family, how I'd always been unappreciative, how every sacrifice they made was supposedly for my good. And this was my thanks. I kept that recording. I'm archiving every single thing. Thursday night, Ethan appeared unannounced at our residence, pulled straight into the driveway. I was in the garage tinkering when I heard the engine. He stepped out looking exhausted and launched right into it, demanding I cease my actions, saying Mom and Dad were breaking down. The bank was requesting mountains of documents. There was now an issue with taxes, and the sign situation was spiraling out of control. I brought up the website, the one locked in for a full decade, the one chronicling my shortcomings since I was a boy. I asked why he created it. Here's the truth about Ethan: he's not unintelligent. He's simply been spoiled his whole life. Instead of showing remorse or even faking it, he attempted to justify himself. He claimed the site was supposed to be an inside family gag, something we'd all chuckle over years later. He said I'd always been overly emotional, and that was truly my issue. He said if I could just lighten up and stop being so serious, none of this would have escalated. A family gag, 10 years of recorded ridicule, a gag. I ordered him to leave my property. He insisted we needed to discuss it maturely. I replied that mature adults don't build websites ridiculing their siblings. He claimed I was proving his point about my hypersensitivity. I walked inside and lowered the garage door. He remained parked in my driveway for 45 minutes before driving off. Friday morning, I learned my parents had published a lengthy post on social media. It described how their oldest child had deserted the family for a manipulative female, how they'd attempted every possible way to contact him, including a public appeal he ignored, how they were devastated parents simply trying to rescue their son from a poisonous relationship. They tagged numerous relatives. They tagged people from our childhood town. They even tagged the official page of my workplace. Emily noticed it first. She was already speaking with James when I walked downstairs. He was coordinating again with the sign firm and also consulting a friend who specializes in libel matters. This is something my parents fail to comprehend. Every action they take, every increase in intensity, every open assault, it's all being recorded. It all strengthens the overall pattern. They believe they're prevailing because they're noisy and forceful, but they're actually supplying more proof of systematic harassment. I spent Friday placing additional calls, pulling more threads. The signboard was removed Saturday morning. My parents discovered it when a passerby informed them. Mom phoned me 19 times within 2 hours. I answered none, but now a fresh development. My mother's sister, my aunt, messaged Emily via Facebook. She located her through the family tags in my parents' post. She wants to meet. Claims she has information about the family that could clarify the situation. I'm unsure whether to believe her. She remained completely silent throughout my life while my parents treated me terribly. Still, Emily believes we should listen to whatever she has to say. Meanwhile, the ringing continues. It's reached 50 to 60 calls daily among the 3 of them now. The messages are growing more frantic. Dad swings between rage, begging, and rage again. Mom keeps sobbing, saying she can't comprehend what's happening to her household. Ethan is threatening to visit my office. Let him come. My human resources team already maintains a complete record of the signboard event. They fully understand who my relatives are and what they've been doing. I'm nowhere near finished, not by a long shot. The signboard was merely the opening move. I'm making certain it won't be the final thing that disappears. Further updates soon. Update 2. Many developments have occurred since the previous message. I need to document everything before the situation worsens. We met my aunt. Strangely, her name is also Sarah, same as my mother-in-law. She selected a cafe roughly 30 minutes from town to avoid being spotted and reported back to my mother. That alone reveals a lot about how my family functions. She offered no dramatic secrets, no confidential papers or concealed family drama. What she provided was background. She explained that my mother has always been fiercely competitive, even during childhood. When my mother wed Dad and gave birth to me, things were okay initially. Then came the 3 consecutive miscarriages over 4 years. In the middle of that sorrow, my mother somehow convinced herself that I was responsible, that bearing me had permanently harmed her, that I'd stolen something irreplaceable. It isn't rational. I realized that grief rarely is. Rather than seeking professional support, my mother allowed the bitterness to fester. When Ethan finally arrived healthy, he represented proof she could still produce perfection, and I became the living symbol of everything she'd endured. My aunt said she once attempted to intervene years earlier, recommended therapy. My mother stopped speaking to her for 2 entire years. They only reconciled when their own mother fell seriously ill and needed coordinated care. Since then, my aunt has been extremely cautious, staying silent to preserve harmony. I asked why she chose to speak now. She answered that their current behavior is unacceptable and she's exhausted from pretending otherwise. However, she emphasized she would not speak publicly or serve as a witness. She has her own household to safeguard. So in summary, I received an explanation but no active supporter. That's acceptable. I never required one. The following day, Ethan carried out his earlier threat. He entered my office building as if he owned it, informed reception he was my brother with an urgent matter. Security contacted my department. My supervisor approached me, visibly uneasy, and said there was an issue downstairs. I accompanied him and found Ethan arguing with 2 guards, insisting he had every right to see his sibling. The disturbance was precisely what I anticipated, loud enough to draw stares from everyone in the reception area, claiming I was the problem and he was only trying to assist. When he spotted me, he immediately changed tone and began begging, saying our parents were disintegrating. Mom hadn't slept properly in days. The financial strain was destroying them. And I needed to halt everything before it became irreversible. I stated very calmly that he had to depart. He refused until we resolved things like relatives. I reminded him that true relatives don't construct 10-year websites cataloging each other's shortcomings. He claimed I'd never move past it, that it was a single incident, and I was exaggerating wildly. I pointed out that the signboard was also a single incident. The letter to my in-laws was single. The cash offers to my colleagues were single. Many singles that together form a clear pattern. His voice rose. He accused me of ripping the family apart over trivial resentments, said I'd always envied him and now I finally had my revenge. Said I'd regret this when our parents passed and I was left completely alone. Security removed him from the premises. My supervisor inquired whether I wished to lodge an official complaint. I confirmed yes. I also requested copies of the surveillance video. He said he'd arrange it. That evening, Emily and I discussed what my aunt had revealed about my mother's grief turning into lasting resentment. Emily asked whether the explanation altered my feelings. I answered no. Comprehending the reason someone injures you doesn't obligate you to tolerate the injury. My mother had 30 years to seek assistance, to make different choices, to treat me with basic humanity rather than as a symbol of her pain. She refused. That responsibility belongs to her. The calls have climbed to approximately 70 per day now. I track them. My phone is practically useless for normal communication at this stage. They've begun ringing Emily's line too. They likely obtained it from the tagged family members in their social media post. Mom's messages have changed. Less weeping, more blame. She claims I've wrecked her marriage because Dad is enraged over the financial investigation. Claims I've turned the entire world against her. Claims she should have anticipated I'd become this way because I was always distant, always detached, never truly part of them. And here's the ironic part, she's correct about the detachment. I stayed distant. Every time I attempted closeness, I was reminded I wasn't the desired child. You don't get to ignore someone for 30 years and then act surprised when no emotional bond exists. Here's where matters shifted again. Daniel, the colleague who first alerted me about the bribery attempts, forwarded an email he'd received. My father had mailed it to several people at my company. He must have gathered addresses via LinkedIn or the corporate directory. The message was a lengthy declaration that I was psychologically unstable, that I'd been deceiving everyone around me for years, that they should exercise caution trusting my words. He copied my HR department. My company has now initiated a formal investigation. Not into my performance, into the ongoing harassment directed at me, the signboard, the office intrusion, now direct outreach to colleagues spreading false statements about my mental condition. They're compiling a thorough record. The HR director personally informed me that the company is contemplating its own legal steps due to the operational interference caused. I never requested that. They independently concluded that my family's conduct had crossed into territory that harms business. At the same time, the bank finally acted. My parents were notified that future payment deferrals will be rejected. They must resume complete payments at once or face accelerated recovery measures. The loan they guaranteed for Ethan is now demanding full attention they clearly weren't expecting. Ethan phoned me personally after that development, not from his usual number, from an unfamiliar one. That's the only reason I answered. When I recognized his voice, I nearly disconnected, but something held me. This time he wasn't hostile. He sounded terrified, truly afraid. Said our parents might lose their home. Said they'd been relying on additional delays to regroup. Said this would financially devastate them and it would be my doing. I asked whose decision it was to co-sign for a venture he destroyed. He said that wasn't fair. I asked whose decision it was to publicly disgrace me rather than leave me in peace. He had no reply. I informed him I wouldn't halt anything. Whatever consequences they face are of their own making. He called me heartless. I said I had excellent teachers. He ended the call that time. The website remains active incidentally. I've requested twice that he remove it. He declines, says he'll delete it once I cease pressuring our parents, as though it's a bargaining chip. Very well. I already have arrangements for that site. Events are accelerating, the ringing is constant, the strain is mounting. They're finally grasping that I'm not the weak target they spent 3 decades shaping. I'm the result of 30 years of their decisions. Final update coming when this reaches its end. Which is imminent, final update. Here we are, the resolution, and truthfully I'm still sorting through it all. The calls peaked at 75 in one day, I kept count. Across my phone and Emily's, 75 attempts in a 24-hour span from my parents and Ethan together. Roughly one every 19 minutes, non-stop. They worked in relays, resting in turns, ensuring constant pressure. I eventually consented to meet, not because I sought peace. Because I wanted to watch their expressions when I outlined what was coming. We chose a public park, plenty of witnesses, safety and visibility. Emily accompanied me. James offered to join. I thanked him but said this was something I needed to face directly with only my wife at my side. My parents appeared destroyed. Dad looked a decade older in just weeks. Mom's hands trembled constantly. Ethan lingered behind them like a beaten puppy. None of the confidence he showed when he stormed my office. Mom began right away, insisting they never intended things to spiral this way. That the sign was Dad's notion, and she hadn't realized how harsh it would appear. That they simply wanted me back in the fold. That they missed me, loved me, couldn't fathom why I was inflicting this pain. I waited until she finished. Then I inquired about the website. She appeared puzzled, said she never really understood online matters, so I opened it on my phone and displayed it. The timeline of my so-called failures, the images, the 10-year lock. Asked if she realized her younger son had planned to ridicule me publicly for an entire decade. She turned toward Ethan. He avoided her gaze. She said she hadn't known it was so thorough. That Ethan had described it as merely a light-hearted family page. Dad interrupted, said we were losing focus, that the true problem was me sabotaging their finances over a dispute, called me spiteful. Said I was punishing them for not being flawless parents by threatening their home. Said genuine men resolve family issues privately, not by involving outsiders. I asked about the messages he sent to my colleagues, the ones labeling me mentally unwell. He claimed he was merely cautioning them about my potential, that my reaction proved he was correct. I asked whether he understood that my company was now evaluating personal legal measures against him for workplace harassment and slander. His expression shifted. That detail was new to him. He began stumbling, insisting he was only a worried parent, that no sensible person would escalate to that level. I replied that sensible people don't display their child's face on a highway sign declaring him a regret. He had no counter. Ethan finally spoke, said we had to discover a solution. That the family couldn't endure continued conflict. I asked whether he planned to delete the website. He paused, said he would if I assisted with the loan crisis. There it was, bargaining. He wanted a trade. I told him the site's fate depended on his actions, not mine. I explained I would not interfere with the bank in any direction because I'd committed no crimes and wouldn't begin now. All I did was ensure their financial reality was transparent and accessible. What follows belongs between them and the lender. Mom began weeping, saying I was merciless, that they raised me, provided food, gave me shelter, and this was my gratitude. I told her she raised me to feel worthless daily throughout my childhood, provided food while constantly reminding me I wasn't the chosen son, gave me shelter where I served as the household joke. I told her I lived 30 years as their official disappointment, and now they were shocked to finally face consequences themselves. Dad rose as if to walk away. Said there was no use reasoning with someone so committed to victimhood. I told him to sit because I hadn't concluded. I laid out precisely what would occur. The bank would exercise whatever rights they possessed. My employer would determine whether to initiate legal proceedings. I would keep recording every harassment instance, and any further unsolicited contact with me, Emily, or anyone connected to me would lead to a protective order. Regarding the website, I informed Ethan that James had already linked me with an expert in internet libel. The domain may be secured for 10 years, but it wouldn't survive long once proper legal steps were taken. He could remove it willingly now or pay dearly to defend it later and lose regardless. Ethan glanced at our parents, hoping for direction. They offered none. For the first time ever, they couldn't rescue him. Dad made one final attempt. Said he couldn't fathom his own son would destroy everything over a few laughs and a sign. Said I was discarding my whole family for ego. Asked whether it was truly worth it, whether I could live with myself after ruining them. I answered that I'd survived their treatment for 31 years. I could survive this without difficulty. We departed. They remained seated in that park. I have no idea how long. That was 3 days earlier. The website vanished yesterday. No communication from Ethan, just gone when I checked. He made his decision. Yesterday, my employer dispatched an official cease and desist notice to my father concerning the workplace harassment. They've compiled a complete record and warned that additional contact will trigger civil proceedings. The bank has granted my parents 60 days to become current on payments or begin foreclosure steps. I don't know their plan. I'm not particularly interested. Certain readers will conclude I overreacted, that I should have pardoned them, worked toward healing, acted more maturely. I've read those opinions on earlier posts. Here's what I wish those individuals understood. I didn't initiate the conflict. I withdrew 3 years ago. I was quietly constructing a positive existence, disturbing no one. They erected the sign. They attempted to purchase damaging stories from my coworkers. They tried to dismantle my marriage. They built a decade-long website to mock me. They contacted my employer labeling me mentally unwell. I didn't overreact. I simply responded with sufficient strength at last. For 31 years, my parents labeled me their biggest regret. They broadcast it on a highway sign for all to read. Now they dial me 75 times daily, pleading for rescue from the results of their own behavior. I'm not responding. They trained me to be their greatest regret. Apparently, they were accurate. I became the regret that ultimately cost them dearly. Thank you to everyone who followed along. I'm finished posting updates. Emily and I are turning our attention to our own life, our future, the real family we're creating together. My phone stays peaceful now. To anyone else facing relatives like mine, you owe them no forgiveness. You owe them no reconciliation. You owe them nothing at all. The only obligation you have is to yourself, a life free from being anyone's target. I needed 30 years to absorb that truth. I'm finally putting it into practice.